The coin was heavy in Sarah's palm. Too heavy. Gold didn't belong in hands like hers, cracked from lye soap, scarred from kitchen burns, calloused from years of scrubbing castle floors. She'd found it in her apron pocket 3 days ago, or rather, she'd discovered it there after the Lichen King had passed through the servants' corridor. She hadn't even looked up. Servants didn't look at the king. They pressed themselves against the walls, held their breath, and prayed to go unnoticed. But somehow, impossibly, the coin had appeared. She'd tried to turn it in to the head housekeeper. "I think someone dropped this." Mrs. Varn had taken one look at the gold piece and gone pale. "Where did you get that?" "I found it. In my pocket. I don't know how." "Keep it." The older woman's voice had been strange, tight. "Say nothing. Do nothing. Wait." But Sarah couldn't wait, couldn't keep it. Gold like this. It was worth more than she'd earn in 5 years. If anyone thought she'd stolen it, she'd lose her hands. Or her head. The Lichen Kingdom didn't tolerate thieves. So she'd done something stupid. Something desperate. She'd requested an audience with the king. The throne room was vast and cold, built from black stone that seemed to swallow the torchlight. Sarah had never been inside it. Servants entered through back passages, invisible hallways designed to keep the lowborn out of sight. But here she stood, clutching the coin so tightly it left an imprint in her flesh, waiting for the monster who ruled this kingdom to decide her fate. She was 23 years old and had been in service since she was 7. Orphaned when her village was raided by rogues, she'd been taken in by the castle not out of kindness, but necessity. Someone had to scrub the pots. Someone had to haul water before dawn and collapse into a straw pallet after midnight. Someone had to be invisible. Sarah had perfected invisibility. 16 years of it. And now she stood in the throne room, visible, exposed, and utterly terrified. The doors behind the throne opened. He entered alone. No guards, no advisors, no fanfare. Just a man, though man seemed inadequate. The Lichen King was enormous, easily 7 feet of broad shoulders and barely contained power. His hair was dark, streaked with silver at the temples, despite a face that looked no older than 35. But lichens aged differently. He could be 300 years old, 400, ancient, dangerous, and looking directly at her. Sarah dropped to her knees so fast her bones cracked against the stone floor. "Your Majesty!" Silence. She didn't dare look up. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake. She should have thrown the coin in the river, should have buried it in the garden, should have done anything except come here. Stand. His voice was deep. Not unkind, but absolute. A voice accustomed to obedience. Sarah stood, kept her eyes on the floor. "Look at me." She couldn't. Her body wouldn't cooperate. 16 years of training held her frozen, gaze fixed on the dark stone, on the edge of his boots as he descended from the throne and walked toward her. He stopped close enough that she could smell him, pine and wood smoke, and something wild underneath. Something that made her pulse jump in a way she didn't understand. "Little one." His voice dropped lower. "I said, look at me." She forced her chin up. The Lichen King's eyes were amber, not brown. True amber, like honey held up to sunlight. They burned into her with an intensity that made her want to flee. But beneath the intensity was something else. Something that looked almost like relief. "You came," he said. Her voice cracked. She thrust out her hand, the coin balanced on her trembling palm. I came to return this. I don't know how it got into my pocket, Your Majesty. I swear I didn't steal it. I would never. I'm not a thief. Please. I just want to give it back. He didn't take the coin. Instead, he smiled. It was a small thing, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from terrifying to something far more dangerous. You can't give it back, he said. I can. I am. Here. She pushed her hand closer to him. Please take it. That's not how this works. Sira's chest tightened. I don't understand. The king reached out, not for the coin, but for her hand. His fingers closed around her wrist, warm and impossibly gentle for someone his size. He turned her palm up, looked at the gold piece as if it amused him, then curled her fingers closed over it. That coin, he said slowly, is not a gift. It's not charity. And it's not something you found by accident. Then what is it? His amber eyes locked onto hers. A claim. The word hit her like cold water. A what? 3 days ago, I walked through the servants' corridor. I do it every week, have done it for 6 years. 6 years, since she'd been assigned to that particular hallway. I noticed you on your first day, he continued. 17 years old, skinny, scared, working harder than anyone twice your age. I've watched you grow, watched you survive, watched you become someone remarkable, even as everyone around you failed to see it. Sira's mind reeled. You watched me. I'm the king. I see everything in my castle. His thumb traced a circle on her wrist, right over her racing pulse. But you, I couldn't stop seeing you. Couldn't stop wanting to know if you'd smile when you thought no one was looking. Couldn't stop memorizing which corridor you'd be in at which hour, just so I could pass through and breathe the same air. That's insane, impossible, a lie. Why? Because you're my mate. He said it simply, as if stating that the sky was blue or water was wet. I knew it the moment I scented you 6 years ago. I've been waiting ever since. Waiting for what? For you to be ready. For me to find a way to approach you that wouldn't terrify you. A rueful edge entered his voice. I'm not certain I've succeeded. Sira's hand shook around the coin. The gold is a claiming mark. In Lycan tradition, when a king finds his mate, he places a coin bearing his seal in her possession. It tells everyone in the kingdom that she belongs to him, that she's protected, cherished. His grip on her wrist tightened fractionally, that anyone who harms her will answer to the crown. I didn't agree to this. No, you didn't. He released her wrist and stepped back. The distance felt like loss, which made no sense. That's why I waited for you to come to me. I won't force you, Sarah. I won't drag you to my chambers or command you to accept what I'm offering. He knew her name. Of course he did. He'd been watching her for 6 years. I'm a servant, she whispered. I'm nothing. Something flickered in his amber eyes. Something fierce and almost angry, but not at her. You're not nothing. You've never been nothing. And if you give me the chance, I'll spend the rest of my very long life proving that to you. Sarah stared at the coin in her hand, the king's seal pressed into her palm, a wolf's head, proud and ancient. This didn't make sense. Powerful men didn't want women like her. They used them, yes, discarded them, but wanted, claimed, cherished. I don't understand, she said finally. The Lycan king smiled again, sad and patient, and burning with something she couldn't name. You will. He didn't send her back to the servants' quarters. Instead, the Lichen King, Kale, he'd told her to call him, though her tongue couldn't form the word, led her through corridors she'd never seen. Not the back passages where servants scurried like mice. The real hallways. The ones with tapestries on the walls and thick carpets underfoot and windows that let in actual sunlight. Sarah followed 3 steps behind him, clutching the coin like a talisman. She kept waiting for the trick. For the moment when he'd turn and laugh at her foolishness, or worse, when the mask of kindness would slip and reveal the monster underneath. Powerful men didn't claim servant girls. They took them, used them, threw them away when they grew bored. She knew this, had watched it happen to other girls in the castle, had made herself small and plain and invisible specifically to avoid that fate. And now the king himself had noticed her, had been noticing her for 6 years. It should have terrified her. It did terrify her. But underneath the fear was something else, a treacherous warmth that flickered every time he glanced back to make sure she was still following. He stopped before a door of carved oak. These will be your rooms. My rooms? You didn't think I'd send you back to the servants' quarters? He pushed the door open. You're under my protection now. You'll live accordingly. Sarah stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. The chamber was larger than the entire servants' dormitory. A fireplace crackled against one wall, casting warm light across a 4-poster bed draped in deep blue velvet. There were chairs, actual chairs with cushions, a writing desk by the window, a wardrobe that probably held more clothes than she'd owned in her entire life. "This is too much," she said. "It's not enough." Kyle remained in the doorway, as if unwilling to enter her space without invitation. "You've spent 16 years sleeping on straw, eating scraps, working until your hands bled. This isn't too much, Sarah. This is the bare minimum of what you deserve." "You don't know what I deserve. You don't know me." "Then tell me." She turned to face him. He filled the doorframe completely, all broad shoulders and quiet intensity, but he made no move to come closer. Waiting. Patient. "Why?" she asked. "Why does it matter?" "Because you matter." He said it simply, without hesitation. "I've watched you for 6 years. I know you hum while you work, when you think no one can hear. I know you sneak bread to the stable cats. I know you once gave your only blanket to a new girl who was crying from the cold, and then spent 3 weeks shivering through the nights until you could earn another." Sarah's throat tightened. She remembered that winter. The new girl had been 13, homesick and terrified. It hadn't seemed like a choice at the time, just something that needed to be done. "That doesn't mean anything," she said. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't have." Kale's amber eyes held hers. "I've lived for 342 years. I've seen countless people in positions of power and positions of poverty. The ones who have nothing are rarely kind. They can't afford to be. But you gave away what little you had, again and again, expecting nothing in return. Do you have any idea how rare that is? 342 years. He'd been alive for 3 centuries, and he'd chosen her. "I'm not special," she whispered. "You're extraordinary. You just haven't had anyone tell you." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest. "What happened to your family? Your village?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked. Servants didn't have histories worth knowing. "Raiders," she said quietly. "When I was 7, they came at night. I hid under the floorboards while—" She stopped, swallowed. "When it was over, there was no one left. A trading caravan found me 3 days later, wandering the roads. They sold me to the castle for 2 silver pieces. Something dangerous flickered across Kyle's face. Sold you? I was lucky. The castle needed workers. Other places. She didn't finish, didn't need to. They both knew what happened to orphaned children with no one to protect them. You were 7 years old. His voice had gone low, rough. A child. And they sold you like livestock. It was a long time ago. Not long enough. He pushed off the doorframe and took a single step into the room. Just one. Giving her space. The raiders who attacked your village, do you remember anything about them? A banner? A symbol? Why? Because I'd like to find them. The implications of that statement settled over her like a heavy cloak. He wanted to hunt down the men who had destroyed her life. Men who had done their damage 16 years ago and probably forgotten she existed. Men who meant nothing to a Lycan king. But they meant something to her, and apparently that was enough. A red wolf, she said slowly, on a black field. I remember seeing it on one of their shields. Kyle nodded once. The Blood Fang clan. They were wiped out 8 years ago for violating territorial treaties. A grim satisfaction entered his voice. Good. You knew them? I ordered their execution. His eyes met hers. Not for you. I didn't know your story then. But I'm glad they're dead. I'm glad they can never hurt anyone else the way they hurt you. Sarah didn't know what to do with that. With any of this. A king who listened to her, who asked about her past, who seemed genuinely angry on her behalf about something that had happened before he even knew she existed. I still don't understand, she said. Why me? You could have anyone. Princesses, nobles, women who know how to read and write and hold themselves at court. Why would you want a servant? I don't want a servant. Kale took another step closer, slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. I want my mate. And fate decided that my mate would be a woman with calloused hands and a generous heart, and absolutely no idea how remarkable she is. Fate could be wrong. Fate is never wrong. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. But you don't have to believe that yet. You don't have to believe any of this. All I ask is that you stay. Let me show you what your life could be. And if, after a month, you still want to leave. Something painful crossed his face. I'll let you go. You'd let me go. I'd rather die than keep you against your will. He said it quietly, without drama, and she believed him. The mate bond is supposed to be a gift, Sarah, not a cage. I won't make it into one. She should say no, should demand to return to the servants' quarters, to the life she understood, to the invisibility that had kept her safe for 16 years. But for the first time since she was 7 years old, someone was looking at her like she mattered, like she was worth something, like she deserved more than scraps and straw and exhaustion. It was probably a lie. It was almost certainly too good to be true, but she was so tired of surviving. Just once, she wanted to see what it felt like to live. 1 month, she said. Kale's smile transformed his entire face. For a moment, he didn't look like a fearsome Lycan king. He looked like a man who'd just been given something precious. 1 month, he agreed. Thank you, Sarah. He left her alone after that, closing the door softly behind him. Sarah stood in the middle of her impossible new chambers, the coin still warm in her palm, and wondered what she'd just agreed to. The fire crackled. The bed looked softer than anything she'd ever touched. She didn't trust it. Didn't trust him. Didn't trust any of this. But when she finally crawled under the velvet covers and pressed her face into a pillow that smelled of lavender and safety, something cracked open in her chest. It felt terrifyingly like hope. The nightmare came on the fourth night. Sarah woke, gasping, clawing at sheets that were too soft, too fine, nothing like the rough wool she'd slept under for 16 years. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The shadows in the corners looked like men with torches, like flames eating through wooden walls, like her mother's face disappearing into smoke and screaming. A knock at the door, urgent, but not demanding. Sarah. Kyle's voice, low and tight with concern. I heard you scream. Are you hurt? She couldn't answer. Her throat had closed around the fear, trapping it inside her chest, where it clawed and writhed like a living thing. The door opened. Kyle stood silhouetted against the torchlight from the corridor, still fully dressed despite the late hour. His amber eyes found her in the darkness, and something in his expression shattered. Little one. He crossed to her in 3 strides, then stopped at the edge of the bed, not touching, waiting. Can I sit with you? She managed a nod. He lowered himself onto the mattress, keeping a careful distance between them. The bed dipped under his weight. He was so large, so solid, so impossibly present in this room that had felt like a fever dream for 4 days. The village? He asked quietly. Another nod. She still couldn't speak. The images were too fresh. Her mother pushing her into the crawl space beneath the floor, whispering, "Don't make a sound. Don't make a sound. No matter what you hear." And then the sounds. The terrible sounds that she'd spent 16 years trying to forget. I have them too. Kyle's voice was barely above a murmur. Nightmares. 3 centuries of war and loss, and watching everyone I love turn to dust while I keep living. Some nights I wake up and I can still smell the blood. Sarah turned to look at him. In the dim light from the dying fire, he didn't look like a king. He looked tired, haunted, human. How do you bear it? She whispered. Badly, most nights. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But it helps to remember that I survived for a reason, that there are still things worth protecting, people worth loving. I don't know why I survived. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Everyone else died. My mother, my father, my little brother. He was 4. He didn't even understand what was happening. And I just hid, like a coward. I hid and I listened, and I didn't do anything. You were 7 years old. Old enough to try. Old enough to fight. Old enough to... To what? Cale's voice sharpened, not with anger, with something that sounded almost like pain. Die alongside them? You think that's what your mother wanted when she hid you? You think she sacrificed herself so you could throw your life away in a futile gesture? Sarah flinched. No one had ever spoken to her about that night. No one had ever made her confront the guilt she'd carried for 16 years like a stone in her chest. She told me to be quiet, Sarah said. She told me not to make a sound. And I didn't. I heard her screaming and I didn't make a sound. What kind of person does that make me? A survivor. Kyle shifted closer, still not touching, but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. It makes you a survivor, Sarah. Your mother gave you a chance to live and you took it. You honored her sacrifice by becoming someone worth saving. I'm not. You are. His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite making contact. May I? She didn't know what she was agreeing to, but she nodded anyway. His palm cupped her cheek. warm, gentle. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed. "I've watched you for 6 years," he said. "I've seen you exhausted and hungry and working through pain that would have broken anyone else. I've seen you show kindness to people who showed you none. I've seen you smile at sunsets through grimy windows and hum songs while scrubbing floors and find beauty in a life that gave you every reason to become bitter." His amber eyes burned into hers. "You're not a coward, Sarah. You're the bravest person I've ever met. You don't know what I've thought, what I've felt." The confession tore out of her, raw and jagged. "There were nights I wanted to give up, nights I thought about walking into the forest and just not coming back. Nights I couldn't see the point of surviving another day." She'd never told anyone that, had barely admitted it to herself. The shame of it sat heavy on her tongue. But Kyle didn't recoil, didn't look at her with disgust or pity. He just kept his hand on her cheek, steady and warm. "And yet you're still here," he said. "Every morning you chose to keep going. Every single day you chose life over oblivion. Do you have any idea how much strength that takes?" It didn't feel like strength. It felt like cowardice, like I was too afraid to stop. Fear can be a kind of courage. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. "Staying alive when everything in you wants to give up. That's not weakness, little one. That's war. And you've been fighting it alone for 16 years. Sarah's breath caught. Something was crumbling inside her. Walls she'd built brick by brick over years of loneliness and pain, cracking under the weight of his words. "Why do you keep calling me that?" she asked. "Little one, I'm not a child." "No, you're not." His eyes dropped to her mouth for just a moment before returning to meet her gaze. "I call you that because when I look at you, I see someone who has carried too much for too long. Someone who deserves to be cherished and protected and made to feel small in the best possible way. Not insignificant, but safe. Held. Precious." Her heart stuttered. "Cale!" It was the first time she'd said his name. His eyes flared with something hot and hungry, but he didn't move, didn't press closer. Just held her gaze with an intensity that made her blood sing. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," he said. "Whatever you're afraid of, whatever ghosts chase you in the dark, I'll fight them with you. I'll stand between you and every nightmare for the rest of your life, if you'll let me." She should pull away, should retreat to the safety of distance and distrust, should remember that powerful men made promises they never intended to keep. But his hand was warm on her face. His eyes held nothing but tenderness, and for the first time in 16 years, she didn't feel alone. "I don't know how to let someone in," she admitted. "I've been surviving on my own for so long. I don't know how to be anything else." "You don't have to know." His forehead came to rest against hers, not a kiss, something almost more intimate, a sharing of breath, a promise. "We'll figure it out together, one day at a time." They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Sarah's heart pounded so loud she was sure he could hear it. Sure he could sense the terrifying, impossible thing taking root in her chest. She was falling for him. This ancient, powerful king who looked at her like she was made of starlight, who touched her like she might break, who listened to her darkest confessions and called her brave. It terrified her more than any nightmare ever had. But when Cale finally pulled back and asked if she wanted him to stay until she fell asleep, she said yes. And when she woke in the morning light, his coat draped over her shoulders and the fire freshly stoked, She realized she hadn't dreamed of flames at all. She'd dreamed of amber eyes and warmth and the impossible feeling of coming home. 2 weeks into her month, Sarah learned that not everyone in the castle was pleased with the king's choice. She'd been walking through the gardens, a liberty she still couldn't quite believe she was allowed, when the voices drifted through an open window. Noble voices, court voices, the kind of voices that had never acknowledged her existence when she'd scrubbed their floors and emptied their chamber pots. A servant, he's lost his mind. 300 years without a mate, and he chooses a kitchen rat. The bloodlines will be polluted. She's probably bewitched him. There are herbs that can muddle even a lichen's senses. We should petition the council. This union cannot be allowed to stand. Sarah's feet had frozen to the garden path. Her heart pounded against her ribs, each beat a reminder of what she was, what she'd always been. Invisible, worthless, a kitchen rat. She'd known this was coming, had been waiting for it, really. The dream couldn't last forever. Cale might want her now, but once his court turned against him, once his advisers made him see reason, once the political cost became too high, he would let her go. He'd promised he would. And she would return to the servants' quarters and the straw pallet and the invisibility that had kept her safe for 16 years. At least she'd had this. 2 weeks of warmth and safety and amber eyes that looked at her like she mattered. It was more than she'd ever expected to have. She was halfway back to her chambers, already planning what she would say, when Cale found her. "Sarah." His voice was sharp with concern. "You're pale. What's wrong?" She couldn't look at him. If she looked at him, she would break. "I think," she said carefully, "that our month should end early." Silence. Heavy and terrible. "Why?" "You know why." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Your court hates me. Your nobles think I've bewitched you. They're petitioning the council to have our arrangement dissolved." Something dangerous flickered across his face. "Who said this to you?" "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." He stepped closer, and she could see the wolf in him now, the predator barely leashed beneath the surface. "Give me their names, Sarah." "So you can what? Punish them? Exile them?" She shook her head. "They're not wrong. I'm a servant. I don't know how to be a queen. I can't read. I can't write. I don't know anything about politics or treaties or... I don't care. You should care." Her voice cracked. "I'm not worth a war with your own court. I'm not worth destroying everything you've built. You're worth more than all of it." Cale's hands came up to grip her shoulders, not hard, but firm, grounding. "My court exists to serve the kingdom. They don't choose my mate. Fate chose my mate. And I will burn every political alliance I have before I let anyone make you feel like you don't belong at my side." Cale... No. His amber eyes blazed. "I have waited 300 years for you. I have watched you from a distance for 6 of those years, wanting you so badly it felt like dying. I have held myself back, given you space, tried to earn your trust, one painstaking day at a time, and I will not let a handful of pompous nobles take you from me." Sarah's breath caught. She'd never seen him like this. The careful control he always maintained had cracked, and underneath was something raw and desperate and barely contained. "You could have anyone," she whispered. "I don't want anyone. I want you." His grip on her shoulders tightened. "I want your laugh and your stubbornness and the way you hum when you think no one's listening. I want your nightmares and your fears and every broken piece you think makes you unworthy. I want all of it, I want you. I'm scared. I know. His voice softened. I'm scared too. That stopped her. You? What do you have to be scared of? Losing you. He said it simply without shame. Every day for the past 2 weeks, I've woken up terrified that this will be the day you realize you can do better, that you'll see me clearly, an ancient, broken king with too much power and too little softness, and decide I'm not worth the trouble. That's ridiculous. You're you're everything. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Kyle went very still. Say that again. Sierra's face burned. I didn't mean… Sierra. His hand came up to cup her cheek, tilting her face toward his. Say it again. She should take it back, should retreat to safety, to the walls she'd built so carefully over 16 years of survival, should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak that came from wanting things she couldn't have. But she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of surviving instead of living, so tired of running from the one thing she wanted more than she'd ever wanted anything. You're everything, she said. You're kind and patient, and you look at me like I matter. You stayed with me through my nightmares. You listened when I told you the worst parts of myself, and you didn't flinch. You make me feel safe for the first time in my entire life. Her voice trembled. I don't want to leave. I don't want the month to end. I want… What do you want? You! The word was barely a whisper. I want you. Kyle made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't gentle or tentative or careful. It was desperate, claiming. 300 years of loneliness and 6 years of watching and 2 weeks of restraint, all pouring out in the press of his lips against hers. Sierra gasped, and he swallowed the sound. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her head back, deepening the kiss until she couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but hold on to him and burn. When he finally pulled back, they were both trembling. Mine, he said, his voice rough and wrecked. You're mine, Sarah. Say it. I'm yours. And I'm yours? He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing hard. Every broken piece of me, every century of loneliness, every part of my heart that I thought had turned to stone. It's yours. It's all yours. Sarah laughed, a wet, shaky sound that was half sob. The court will hate this. Let them. Kyle's smile was fierce and wild and beautiful. Let them whisper and scheme and petition until their tongues fall out. You are my mate, my queen, my everything. And anyone who tries to take you from me will learn exactly why the Lycan Kingdom has feared its king for 300 years. Now, she should have been frightened by the violence in his words, should have remembered that he was a predator, ancient and powerful and capable of terrible things. But all she felt was safe, cherished, home. I love you, she said. Kyle's breath caught. For a moment, he looked younger than she'd ever seen him, not a centuries-old king, but a man hearing the words he'd waited a lifetime to hear. I love you too. He kissed her again, soft this time, reverent. I have loved you since the moment I first saw you. I will love you until the stars burn out and the world turns to dust. And nothing, not my court, not my kingdom, not death itself, will ever change that. Sierra wrapped her arms around his neck and held on tight. The month wasn't over yet, but she already knew she was never leaving. The bonding ceremony took place on the first day of spring. Sierra stood before the great doors of the throne room, The same doors she'd walked through as a terrified servant, clutching a gold coin she'd tried to return. That had been 3 months ago, a lifetime ago, a different woman ago. The gown she wore was deep blue velvet, the same shade as the bed she'd slept in that first night. A crown of silver and sapphires rested on her head. Delicate, elegant, nothing like the heavy gold worn by queens of old. Cale had commissioned it himself. Something light, he'd told the jeweler. She's carried enough weight in her life. The doors swung open. The throne room was packed. Nobles lined the walls in their finest clothes, their faces carefully neutral. Sarah recognized some of them, the voices from the garden, the ones who had called her a kitchen rat and whispered about witchcraft. They stood rigid and silent now, watching her walk down the aisle toward their king. She didn't look at them, didn't need to. They had already lost, and they knew it. Kyle waited at the altar, dressed in black and silver, his amber eyes burning as she approached. He looked like a predator, like a king, like the most dangerous man in the kingdom. He looked at her like she was the only person in the room. "You came," he said softly, echoing his words from their first meeting. Sarah smiled. "I thought about returning the crown. Seemed like too much trouble." Something flickered in his eyes, amusement and love and fierce, possessive joy. "That's not how this works?" "So I've been told." The ceremony was brief. Lycan bondings didn't require lengthy rituals or elaborate vows, just a bite, a mark that would bind them together for eternity, visible to every wolf in the kingdom. Cale's teeth grazed her neck, and Sarah tilted her head back in offering. The pain was sharp and bright and gone almost instantly, replaced by a warmth that spread through her entire body. She felt him in her blood now, in her bones, in the very beat of her heart. "Mine," he breathed against her skin. "Yours," she agreed. "Always." When they turned to face the crowd, Sarah saw something she hadn't expected. Mrs. Varn, the head housekeeper who had told her to keep the coin, stood at the edge of the gathering, tears streaming down her weathered face. The woman pressed a hand to her heart and bowed her head. Sarah bowed back. The feast that followed was lavish beyond anything she'd imagined. Food she couldn't name, wine that cost more than she'd earned in a year, music that made her want to dance until her feet ached. Cale stayed by her side through all of it, one hand resting possessively on the small of her back. But the moment she'd been waiting for came near midnight. Lord Ashworth approached the head table with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah recognized his voice. He'd been the one who called her a kitchen rat, who had suggested she'd bewitched the king with herbs. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, bowing to Cale. Then, with obvious reluctance, "Your Highness?" Sarah inclined her head. "Lord Ashworth." Something flickered across his face. Surprise that she knew his name. Unease at the calm in her voice. "I wanted to offer my congratulations," he continued, each word clearly costing him, "and to assure you both that the Council's concerns have been laid to rest. We see now that fate's wisdom exceeds our own." "How gracious of you," Cale said. His voice was pleasant. His eyes were not. "I trust there will be no further petitions regarding my queen's suitability?" Lord Ashworth's jaw tightened. "No, Your Majesty." "Excellent." Cale's smile showed too many teeth. "Because I would hate for anyone to forget what happens to those who threaten what is mine." The Lord paled, bowed again, retreated. Sarah watched him go with a satisfaction she probably shouldn't have felt. But after 16 years of being invisible, of being nothing, of being something to be sold and used and discarded. There was a vindication in watching powerful men choke on their own arrogance. "You're smiling," Cale murmured. "I'm thinking about revenge. The best revenge is living well." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And you, little one, are going to live very well indeed." 3 years later, Sarah stood in the garden where she'd once overheard nobles plotting against her. The roses were blooming, the sun was warm on her face, and a small weight rested against her hip. Their daughter, barely 6 months old, with her father's amber eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. "She has your glare," Cale observed, coming up behind them, his arms wrapped around Sarah's waist, pulling her back against his chest. "That look she gives the nursemaids when they try to put her down." "I don't glare." "You absolutely glare. You glared at me for an entire month." "You put a coin in my pocket without asking." "I claimed my mate. There's a difference." Sarah laughed, a real laugh, full and bright, the kind she'd almost forgotten she was capable of making. Kyle pressed his face into her hair and breathed deep, and she felt his contentment through the bond, felt his love, steady and unwavering, the same as it had been every day for 3 years. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing a servant? Defying your court?" "Never." He turned her in his arms, careful not to jostle the baby. "I would defy 1,000 courts, burn 1,000 kingdoms, start 1,000 wars." His forehead came to rest against hers. "You are worth all of it, Sarah. You always have been." She thought about the girl she'd been, 17 years old, scrubbing floors in a castle that didn't know her name, hiding in plain sight, surviving, but never living, never hoping, never believing she deserved anything more than exhaustion and invisibility and a straw pallet at the end of each endless day. That girl would never have believed this, would never have imagined that she could be cherished by a king, crowned before the nobles who'd dismissed her, loved so fiercely and completely that it sometimes took her breath away. But that girl had kept going, had chosen life over oblivion, day after day, even when she couldn't see the point, had survived long enough for fate to find her, had kept the coin, even when she'd tried to give it back. "I love you," she said, because she could, because she'd earned the right to say it, because 3 years later, the words still made his eyes soften like nothing else could. "I love you too." Kyle kissed her, soft and slow, tasting of forever. "My mate, my queen, my everything." Their daughter made a small sound of protest at being squished between them. They pulled apart, laughing, and Sarah lifted the baby higher so Kyle could press a kiss to her tiny forehead. This was her life now. Warmth and laughter and love so big it sometimes scared her. A king who looked at her like she hung the stars. A daughter who would never know what it felt like to be invisible. She'd tried to give back the king's coin. He'd claimed her instead. And she had never, not for a single moment, regretted staying. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale of fated mates, fierce kings, and the women who capture their hearts. Until next time.